welcome back to Anarchapulco TV, your home for the world's premier Liberty Conference happening in Acapulco, Mexico, February 13th through the 16th. I'm your host, David Rodriguez, and we have another main stage speaker I'm really excited to introduce you to today. If you haven't heard about him, he is one of the visionaries of humanity. I'm not saying that just to pump him up. He really is doing some great work for 20 years, helping people fight threats preventively, not like cops or the military, like proactively going after, but actually creating conditions where these threats and crimes cannot occur. Very fascinating story. And he's doing a workshop also in Acapulco in February. So really cool stuff to talk about. So before we get into introducing himself, his name is Mr. Dale Brown, founder of Threat Management Center. Welcome to the show, Dale.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Dave.
Hey, man, I'm so excited you're going to be speaking at Anarchapulco for the first time this year. This is the 6th year we've been doing this conference. And as some of our viewers know, we just want to create a voluntary world where people just interact voluntarily. However, protection is one of the most important things that we need as humans, and security. And because the police have a monopoly and it's funded through taxation, which is theft, we're not sure how to deal with that. But you've had this organization that uses voluntary consensual solutions. So for some of the people who don't know about your story, just a little bit, could you tell them maybe how you started your organization and maybe some of the philosophies and principles behind it? I think they'll really enjoy that.
Yes, I started my organization in 1994. I was teaching self-defense in the parks here in Detroit. And the whole point of the teaching was to empower people with the ability to protect themselves. So when people found themselves in situations where the government could not supply police in a realistic time to help them in situations, my plan was to make sure that people could help themselves and to give them the actual skill set, the knowledge about both the laws that apply to their situation, as well as how to use weapons and how to use non-lethal forms of self-defense. And so I started teaching in the parks in Detroit. I started teaching because a woman was chased off a bridge in Detroit. And I thought, if somebody was on that bridge and had my training, they could have stopped this from happening. And I knew that could be done. And so I thought, I need to train these people. I need to go to Detroit and train them. And that's what I did. And so while training them, I realized that the people were in such a severe and significant condition that they needed more than just training. They needed actual protection. So I created an actual protection organization of volunteers, and eventually it turned into a business. At first, I found people from the community that would volunteer to protect their community. I offered them training. Then I made a deal with the business owners that owned buildings, that owned rental properties, that if they would give a rental property to a guard, that guard would protect their building 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So we're able to protect 400 dwellings in 1 square block, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, creating safety for the families. As a result of stopping the rape, robbery, killings, the daily home invasions in Detroit, we were able to create a situation where the building owners, which were already wealthy, got much more wealthy. So we made rich people richer, and as a result, they were willing to invest more in their protection, because they saw that there was a direct correlation between protection and prosperity. So that's what I learned, is that if we protect something, we can make it prosperous. And if we don't protect it, it will not be prosperous. We cannot prosecute people into a prosperous state. So we have to create a condition where we don't have violence, we don't have crime, we don't have the violent conditions which lead to predation, and therefore leading to losses of life and liberty, as well as people's property. So I created an actual system, a training system, and an organization to carry out that system. And for the past 25 years, we've been protecting families, communities, and corporations successfully, creating nonviolent outcomes by creating non-adversarial interaction. We teach psychology, law, and skill in that order. So you learn how to read body language, you learn how to use the law to your advantage, and to protect yourself from both civil and criminal liabilities, at least mitigate them. And then actual skill set development, how to disarm guns, disarm knives, how to physically keep yourself safe, how to escape, control, or immobilize threat within 3 moves or less. So I had a chance to try these techniques. I've had thousands of people come to my organization over the past 25 years. And I had a chance to actually see the tactics work against actual violent individuals and violent gangs. So we had a chance to test the actual skill set. Now, after 25 years, none of our staff members are dead. 6 of us have been shot, 1 female, 5 men. We stabilized our wounded, transported them to level 1 trauma hospitals as we were trained to do so. And we disarmed knives, disarmed guns, and took people into custody without injuring them, without killing them, successfully for 25 years. So we were able to dominate threat and create nonviolent outcomes and teach others how to do that. We have both civilians and police officers that train in our system, and you can find them on our website, threatmanagementcenter.com. And there you'll see actual testimonials from the people that we train to protect themselves and others. Another thing that we do that's unique is we protect people for free that can't afford services. So we protect the domestic violence victims, stalking victims, the people that have actual dedicated killers that want to kill them for whatever reason. These people are typically women, children, elderly, families in some cases. If they witnessed a murder, someone wants to kill them for being a witness, even though all they were doing was just being at the park or walking down the street. What we do is keep them alive and safe. And we do that as volunteers. And so what I've also learned is that what we need in order to create a safer world, a better world, are people that are willing to be altruistic, people that believe in protecting people. So ultimately, the most important tool, the most important weapon that any protector can have, and the foundation of any appropriate protection, is love of humanity. You have to love people in order to protect people. And so that's what we're here to spread, how to do that, how to train, how to teach people, how to open a facility that will teach people in every community, in every city, in every town, in every state, and every country, how to protect themselves and their communities, and how to do that non-violently. Essentially, what we've learned in the past 25 years is how to use psychology to create a non-adversarial interaction for a non-violent outcome. And now it's, again, proven after 25 years of something we do in Detroit and surrounding communities. I've used this in other countries as well. I even had to take a guy into custody in Denmark who was trying to attack someone that I was protecting, an entertainer. And I took him into custody, took him down after he attacked me. He couldn't get to my client, but I did so without injuring him, which is what we're proud of. The ability to manage human threat without injuring and killing people.
Yes. Well, this is one of the reasons I love Threat Management Center, because you use the non-violent methods, and we see all these videos of cops doing really violent things. It's not to say those are bad humans, but they've been very poorly trained. They have a monopoly on the service. They don't need to get better. And so by introducing these types of individual private solutions, voluntary solutions, I think is what evolved to. And you can see behind me, the theme this year is evolve, and it's time to evolve beyond coercive organizations, coercive ideas, coercive individuals, because that's not helpful. It's disrespectful to humanity, and that's what you're doing there. So I love how you talk about the mindset of loving humanity, because a lot of these guys are doing it for the money. They pay these cops so much money, they get huge pensions, and they have something called qualified immunity, which you can barely even sue these cops, and there's like almost zero accountability, whereas you, in a private sector, you actually can be liable. This is why, I think you've been very careful and strategic in running your business. But can you talk a little bit about the importance of communities out there? Because some of the voluntarists out there, they want to start their own community, but they don't understand if you go start a community, you're still going to have some type of protection, some type of security, even if you guys are all loving people, which I believe most of us are kind, loving people. But what about starting a community or having a neighborhood? The importance of having protection there, and some of the maybe mechanisms we put in place, or some of the philosophies that you share with some of these founders or visionaries of these communities who want to start these things, but they don't know how to protect their people properly.
Yes. Well, let's touch on several subjects. First of all, the private sector, when it comes to protection, it essentially is saying, listen, I'm going to protect you, not for anything greater than money. That's the cause. And that really can't work in protective services. So one of the things that I get commonly are people saying, well, I'd like to also use protection for public safety. And you're going to see that literally can't work. Right now, private companies are trying to police people. And those private companies are failing miserably. They're doing everything the police are doing, but 10 times worse. And the reason why they're 10 times worse is because what they're doing is trying to police people. doing what the police are doing, but doing it privately without government sanctioning, without government protection, and without the perception of higher purpose being from the state. And that in and of itself means that you're only doing it for the money. So that can't work. It's actually worse to use a private sector entity that's thinking about protecting people for money than it is for people that are protecting it for the greater good of the state. And there you'll find that the Blackwater, for example, the reason why they changed their name several times now is because of their behavior in a corporate setting. It will lead many more of their members to go to prison, and some are in prison right now. Mm-hmm. And more are going to be going to prison if they continue that behavior. And that's what happens when you have a private paramilitary corporation acting as a government military. So you really can't act the same way. You can't do the same thing. That's why we don't provide policing or public policing or private policing. What we provide is something completely new, completely different. It's called preventive threat management. So preventive threat management is exactly what it is. It's very direct. It's defined by its words. It prevents threats and manages them. So that is what we do. We don't police people. We don't privately police people. And very important is to avoid the things you say that you don't like. Well, if you do it privately, it's just going to be worse. There's going to be less steps. So a private corporation trying to do what the government's doing would simply just do it worse. And you'll hear people say, well, taxes are like the mafia. Yeah. The difference is in taxes, when you don't pay them, there's some kind of a bureaucracy and some court dates and some warrants or something. Whereas in the private sector, they simply come in, abduct your family. So there's no, the way that they get their taxes in a private setting and a corporate setting in what they call payola or what they call extortion is they simply come to your house and take your family member and don't give them back until you pay your money that they say you owe with no bureaucracy involved. That being said, the bridge is this. You don't need to be thinking about how to police people. You don't need to be thinking about how to put them in prison, how to put them in jail, how to prosecute them. That's all counterintuitive, counterproductive for any healthy society. You can never prosecute enough people to create a prosperous and properly performing community or public environment for anyone to thrive or survive. So the more you think about how to create negative conditions, the more you're going to destroy any positive in long-term effects from that societal structure. So what we do is specifically show you how to do that. How can I create a safe environment? How can I create a prosperous environment? And the only way to do that is to think completely differently than what's already been done. Completely differently in every way, literally. So instead of thinking about how we enforce laws on people, we should be thinking about how to inspire people to do things in such a way that it is appropriate for the community, for the society. And then there has to be the idea and the understanding that there is no opportunity to do negative things. You have to deny opportunity for violence to occur, or you're going to have violence, and now you're going to have to respond to it. And responding to violence just has different levels of failure, because ultimately you don't want to have a fire department that comes by every time there's a fire. You want them to create situations where there are no fires. So the reason why we don't have schools in America that are catching fire is because there's fire codes that don't allow you to use certain paints in schools. They don't allow you to set up schools a certain way. There's all these codes that are enforced that create the safety, so that therefore there is not going to be the school fires that are going to kill all the children, which used to happen more commonly in the United States, consistently. So we have to create conditions for positive. If you don't create the conditions for positive, then people will inherently create negative conditions. And that means that there will be accountability and responsibility for those things, and those things will have horribly negative effects. So for example, when you want to create a organization or societal structure, you have to be very definitive and very structured, or else with your freedom will come self-destruction if you're not careful on how that's done. So for example, if we want to create a community and we want people to get along, we would have to choose people based upon the criteria of getting along, not on economics. Some of the worst people we've met have been doctors and executives that want to attack each other and be violent. So wealthy, highly educated, and still extremely violent over something like a property line value, a property line. In one case, a fence, an actual physician wanted to attack her neighbors because they put up a $30,000 fence. So she got so angry that she literally got in her vehicle as a gynecologist. She was going to attack the men with her car. So imagine if you were thinking the use of force is now, legal because she's using a vehicle as a weapon and threatening someone. So she has both the intention and the actions of crime, and she's coming towards someone with a car. And so now you can shoot them. So imagine if your private entity company now shoots this neighbor and kills this lady, which is legal because she was trying to attack the neighbor with the car. Can you imagine trying to get dues from the homeowner association because sometimes your security has to kill the people that live in the neighborhood? It just, it's legal, but we had to kill the lady because this doctor tried to attack their neighbors, and we used lethal force because we could legally do that.
Right. No, let me feed back to what I'm hearing, because this is really important. You mentioned rather to have fires going on all the time, you want to have preventive measures. So what I'm hearing, you've created what's called a category creator. You're not saying you're private or public police. You're saying you are preventive threat managers, and this is the category that you want to move forward towards. And so in selecting, go ahead.
A paradigm shift in public safety, completely new way of looking at public safety, a completely new method of creating safety for communities and corporations and countries.
Yes. And it's definitely necessary. We were just talking earlier about some war that's going to be happening now. It's like, you can't kill people and expect no consequences or repercussions. What are these guys doing? So for some of the people we're talking to, they want to start their own communities. What would you say? Because you mentioned you don't want the doctors or the lawyers or some people that's going to use aggression or force or coercion. And, for us, we believe in the self-ownership principle, right? You own your body. The non-aggression principle, you don't use coercion or force against a person or their property. Then the self-defense principle, which, lastly, you want to hurt somebody, but if they're attacking you and your person, you have some kind of moral justification to defend yourself, protect your family, your kids. But, still, we don't want to kill people. We want to have peaceable, negotiable solutions if possible. So what would you say to visionaries who want to start the community? Like, who would you look to partner with? Or what would be the founding principles of an intentional community to put protection first and not to invite these psychopaths or sociopaths who are just going to ruin the community for everybody?
Well, in order to create a safe community, you'd have to have threat management as part of that foundation. There's really no way. Preventive threat management really is that. It's how to understand the psychological components to creating safety. And so in order to do that, you'd also have to have the fundamental ability to create change. So, for example, with that doctor, this is a real life story. She really did go next door and use her weapon or vehicle as a weapon. And instead of us using the force, which we're legally allowed to use, we used psychology and we created a positive outcome. And we spoke to her and got her out of the vehicle and got the vehicle off people's property and got her back to her home. Her and her husband moved out. Her husband's an engineer. And the men next door are still living there with their $30,000 fence. So we solved the issue without violence. And that means that we didn't just have intentions, we had methodology. The first method we had to use, the first skill we had to have, the first tool we used was our love of humanity. You see, I had to look at that doctor as though she's my sister. And my sister is a doctor, so that was easy for me. But you have to look at all people as your family. So do you want to, if this person is angry, kill your family member? The answer is no. So since you don't want to kill your own family, don't plot, plan, and strategize ways of legally killing other people's family members. So that's all we are, is all humans. We're all part of one family. So we need to look at ways to not kill people. And that means you have to honestly say to yourself, I don't want to, and I'm not going to kill these people in order to avoid killing them. Otherwise, righteous violence is easy. It's an easy path. You can start thinking about violence subconsciously. If someone does this, I will kill them. So if someone comes to my house, for example, I will just kill them, right? People say that all the time. You come to my house, I'll kill you, right? Of course, who comes in your house? Drunk people, drunk college kids, people that are high school kids. Normally, the people that are going to break in your house are not Ted Bundy. Normally, the people that break in your house are not Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. Right. They're petty thieves. They're not major killers. Yeah. They're just neighbors' kids down the street. Ex-boyfriends, ex-girlfriends, ex-husbands, ex-wives. And no, you don't want them in your house. but you need to find ways not to kill people, because you'll find that killing them is completely non-beneficial 9 times out of 10.
Mm.
So we don't know that because we don't know the repercussions for the killing of someone, even though it's righteous and considered legally correct. You'll find that when you can legally justify a killing of someone, it does not make it politically correct, morally correct, or financially correct. So you can actually be sued, and many people are, after they shoot someone, after they kill someone, even though they were correct in the law, civilly, they're still responsible for those wounds and injuries. So one more reason to want to not create violence, one more reason to focus on creating peaceful outcomes, is not just because you're a nice, benevolent, good person, it's because you like prosperity. And you will never prosper using violence to create conditions of managing human conditions and human behavioral conditions. So creating conditions for nonviolent outcomes is a lot of planning. It's expensive, but it's nowhere near as expensive as the response to not having proper protection. So for example, if you wanted to create school safety, what you would do is not let people on the school property that have guns to go kill people. You would make it so that there's no way you could get into the school without being verified. You can't even get on the school property without being verified. There's no way you get into a school without being searched for weapons. Why are you allowing someone into a school with a weapon in the first place? Why are you not making schools automatically impossible for someone to breach? There's no reason to make it so that a person can walk onto school property, walk up to a school, go into a school, unless they were authorized in three different ways. So it doesn't take violence, it takes precaution. It doesn't take oppression, it takes conditions where you don't allow conditions to happen that are negative. So there's all kinds of ways to do it with anti-ballistic materials, and it's a lot less expensive to use money to buy anti-ballistic materials like windows, magnetic locks to lock doors and control spaces than it is to plan burials for people afterwards, post-event. So creating conditions for nonviolent outcomes, non-adversarial outcomes is prosperous in every way more prosperous than managing issues after people have been injured and killed. So when you're talking about communities like seasteading or any other kind of private communities, it is vital to first do screening and then to have already create a condition where things were already set up from a safety perspective. That means architecturally. That means the structures would have to be inherently safe. That means the area around the structure would have to be inherently safe. And there's ways we can do that through threat management architecture and through threat management design of the landscaping. There's lots of things we can do to create safety without violence. And violence is always going to be counterproductive. So a lot of people think, well, if I have my gun, what I can do is I can protect myself with my gun. Didn't every dead police officer, soldier, and violent criminal have a gun at the time of their death? Right. Yes. You're not better than any of the dead police officers 9 times out of 10. Right. You're not better trained. You're not better prepared. And if a police officer cannot protect their life from a violent criminal, why would you think you're better than them? When 9 times out of 10, there's nowhere you don't have nowhere near the training that a police officer has, and yet many are dead from being involved in shooting situations. Right. So every violent criminal that was armed that got killed, and lots of them get killed, they had a gun, so they thought they could survive too. Soldiers go to war, and they're killed. And to give you an example of how counterproductive the thought process is with guns and how it's not like a TV show. But let me give you examples. Many of our team members throughout the years have been ex-military. In one of the cases, one of our Marines who served in Iraq and Afghanistan said he was at a building that they had to surround and hold for the Delta Force or SEAL team to show up. It was SEAL team members, he was told. And he said he was awestruck by the fact they had beards and they looked older. They were in their 30s or something. He said they looked awesome, and he was impressed by, their uniforms, their weapons, and they came in on black helicopters. He said they went into the building and there was a shootout, and then all the SEAL team guys left, and one of them was injured. They took him, they all jumped in these 2 different helicopters and left the area. And he said then the Marines went inside and looked around, and there was no dead bodies. There was no one inside the structure. That means the SEAL team guys shot themselves. So there's no way you're going to be better than SEAL team guys. You're not going to be better than military guys. You're not going to be better than the police when you're using a firearm. It's that difficult to actually shoot people properly under real life conditions, under high threat conditions. You can shoot unarmed people and you can shoot thieves. Thieves are easy to shoot. People shoot thieves all the time. People shoot unarmed people all the time. It is extremely difficult to shoot people that can actually harm you. And recently there was a church shooting in which people are celebrating a guy who shot the church shooter. This is the highest form of neglect. And of course, if he was a babysitter, he'd be in prison. Because number one, this church security person who allowed the guy to come in the church with a wig on would have been found negligent if he was a babysitter. So what would have happened? They would have said, well, you saw a person with a wig on acting strange. Why would you let him into a place full of children if you were babysitting, if you were at a daycare or something? And they'd say, why didn't you call 911 immediately? That's what they would have said. And you said, well, I have a gun, so I was going to defend myself and the kids if this strange person pulled out a gun. They definitely would lock you up because you'd be prosecuted for negligence because your job is to protect. And protection means you prevent conditions. So this man lets the guy come in. The guy pulls out a shotgun and shoots and kills one of the church members and wounds another one. Then they call him the hero, security guard, church security, who is ex-military, ex-law enforcement, and he shoots the guy in the head, okay? You've already allowed someone to be murdered by this strange person who entered the church. You allowed someone to shoot a secondary person, and then you shot him in the head. That's not winning. That's losing. That's not protection. That's the opposite of protection. That's responding after someone's been killed. And you knew who they were ahead of time and still did not have the training or the skill set to create a positive nonviolent outcome. And that's what we created this organization for. So my education teaches you how not to allow people to create the conditions. If there is a situation where there's violence, you learn biomechanically how to dominate that threat. What they should have done at that church is they should have been so close he couldn't pull out the gun in the first place. They should have assessed him before they even let him inside and not even let him in the church, realizing he has a disguise on. Why are you letting someone in your church? Do you have people at your church all the time wearing wigs and fake beards? I don't think so. With a trench coat on.
Right.
So,
I mean, this is the challenge though, like, because at church it's just kind of like come and go as you please, right? Like you don't want to have like a prison type. You got to go through the body scanner, like you go on the airplane. You got to get patted down. It's a really slippery slope. So I'm curious what you think the best outcome could have been.
It's not slippery slope at all with training. See, without training, it's confusing. It's like if I was going to try to do surgery or be a car mechanic. I'm not a car mechanic. So it would be very difficult for me to understand how to fix a car. I'm not a car mechanic. So that's why I'd have to be trained if I was going to change oil on a car. I'd have to be trained on how to do things in order to do them. Imagine though, people think they naturally can protect because they actually have a gun. That's the dumbest thing I ever heard in my life. That's like thinking because you have muscles, you can lift weights. Really? That doesn't mean you can lift weights. In fact, you could not lift enough weight, have lots of muscles, and injure yourself because you don't know how to lift weights properly. Or how about you believe you can fight because you can break bricks, or believe you can fight because you have big muscles. This happens a lot. And people find out that muscles and fighting, although it sounds good and looks good in the movies, especially in one of my favorites, Conan the Barbarian, where Arnold Schwarzenegger had a sword and looked awesome. But the reality is there was a small Asian instructor in that movie that would have killed him in real life easily. So the reality is not our feelings. So we may feel that, for example, anyone should be able to go to our church. And that's not true. And I went to a Catholic church one time and no one knew me there. And when I walked in the door, the priest actually stopped me and questioned me and then told me to come back another day. So he just didn't trust me. He didn't like me, for whatever reason. So they don't have to let you in a church. It's a private location.
Gotcha. Okay. So you're saying they should have some type of security watching, paying attention, looking for suspicious persons, and prevent those people from coming in versus just letting anybody come in and then he can just shoot anybody. So that's kind of like your solution for that.
I guarantee you they don't let anybody in there. I can take a group of guys from, some inner city guys and take them to that same church. They would never have let them in that church. But they let this person in because they thought he'd be okay. A little strange looking, but they believed he'd be okay. I could have taken a bunch of kids from the inner city to that same church. They would never have let those kids in there. And they would have stopped them at the door. So they are screening. They just don't have the proper training to know what real threat is. So although they would have stopped the inner city kids from going to that church, they wouldn't have stopped this individual, and that's the person they should have been looking for. So without proper training, you'll have fear of strangers, and you might even think that stranger danger makes sense. But the reality is, the majority of people that are killed by people that they know, friends and family, in this country. So imagine the person who's going to kill you is the person who looks like you, a person who acts like you, someone who talks like you, someone that has the same education as you, because that's who you're around. Whoever you're around is most likely the people that are going to rape, rob, and kill you. That's the nature of human violence. It's not stranger danger you have to worry about. You have to worry about the people that live next to you, look like you, walk like you, and talk like you, no matter what community you live in. Asian, Native American, African American, Latino American, European American. It doesn't matter what your community is. The people that are going to harm you are going to be people that look like you and come from your same community. Stranger danger is minimal in every community. And the leading cause of death for children in the United States, according to CDC, is parents. So it's not strangers that are killing the children. It is their own parents that are killing the children. And that's because there's lots of people with mental health issues. There's lots of different types of mentally ill people that need medicine, they need assistance. And there's different conditions, environmental conditions, that also lead to people making bad decisions. So the reality is that we need to look at the psychology of people if we want to understand people. If we want to understand conditions, we don't need to look at a book. We need to look at human behavior. We don't need to pray and think and hope. We need to create change by understanding how something works and then create the change we want. And that change has to be positive, because if what we're doing is negative, in other words, if we're treating people differently than we want our own family to be treated, then we are inherently doomed. Anything that you do to other people that's negative is going to negatively affect you eventually. So do unto others as you have them do unto you is not just something from a religious text. That's a warning that, in fact, the world is a circle. So whatever we put out there in the world, it's coming back to us. So my point is, go out there, treat everyone like family, use your love of humanity to make your decisions about humanity, and remember that violence is the enemy of humanity, not the people. So if we just remember to stop the violence, we can actually create greater change on a much larger scale. So that's the point of my organization, is to create change in a very large way by creating the skill set necessary to create positive change by removing fear. If you don't have the ability to remove the fear from a person, there's no way you can manage the fear that they're going to use to make determinations on their courses of action. So in other words, when I have fear of something, I think you're coming to harm my family, then I'm going to take an action. One of the things I do is with law enforcement officers that we train, as well as civilians, is I take them through a set of psychological drills. I say, what do you do when you see a man holding a woman by her throat against the wall? What is a positive reason, a neutral reason, and a negative reason you would see a man holding a woman by her throat against the wall? This is part of our training system. It's called threat discernment triad. Without the threat discernment triad, you look at everything at face value. So when you see a man holding a woman by her throat against the wall, you might think negative. And it could be negative. A man holding a woman by her throat could be negative, but it also could be neutral or positive. So when I ask a lot of police officers and civilians, I'll say, what's the neutral reason that a man is holding a woman by her throat? It's not good or bad. It's just not a big deal. And what's a good reason a man is holding a woman by her throat against the wall? And typically most men will say, I can't imagine. There's no good reason. There's never a reason to hold a woman by her throat against the wall. Well, that's why you end up using that philosophy, that idea, to make a decision, such as pulling a gun or shooting someone, right, or tackling someone, hitting them. And when in reality, the reason why a man may be holding a woman by her throat against the wall could be because she's showing him self-defense. She's teaching him something. She could be, they could be lovers, and this could be something they want to do consensually. Then it could also be a medical treatment. To you, it looked like he was choking her, but in reality, he's actually checking your lymph nodes or something on her throat. Right. See, if you don't think of those things, though, you just think negative and you take a negative action. And that is what's common. Without training, you are commonly going to make those decisions. That's why we have so many misunderstandings, because we don't have the training not to have the misunderstandings. So we make decisions based on feelings without having the facts. And so essentially what our training system does is teaches people how to discern real from false situations and create the best possible outcome. And if it is violent, how do you solve it without violence? And we show you biomechanically how to dominate someone, take them under control against their will without injuring them, without killing them. And so once you have that knowledge, you don't have fear. So once you know you can take someone's gun, you can take their knife from them, you can take them into custody without injuring and killing them. Once you know you don't have that fear, you can now be calm. So even when a person is mentally ill, or doesn't take their medicine, or has some kind of medication problem, you can still be calm enough to come up with a non-violent outcome, to create a non-adversarial interaction. We had a situation where an executive took two types of medications, one from a dentist and one from a doctor, and this caused him to have a mentally unstable event. He took out a 14-inch blade and started swinging it at cars. Now, this person went to college. He has parents that love him. And we know him because we would see him come to our gate. This is one guy who lives in one of our gated communities, one of the community members. And he was always very professional. He worked for one of the major power companies, very well-trusted, management-level individual, upper management, and very polite, very respectful, highly educated individual. We've never seen him act inappropriately. Now, all of a sudden, he's swinging a 14-inch blade at cars that are passing by, screaming. So we call 911, and my team members go and approach him. As we approach him, he drops the knife. And what's funny is a prosecutor grabbed the knife and took it to one of my staff members at our post and said, "Here, take this knife." And one of my team members said, "Man, we don't take weapons from people off the street." And what was interesting is the prosecutor said, she thought it was very unprofessional that we would refuse to take this knife from this person off the street, which is her, prosecutor. We didn't know who she was at the time. So once I spoke with her, I said, "Ma'am, we don't know if that knife was used in a crime. So we would not know whose fingerprints are on that blade, and we would not want to put our hands on there anyway. There's no one near the blade. We're not going to let them pick it up. But that blade needs to go into police custody, and that blade needs to be taken into custody in case it was used in a crime. We don't know if someone's been stabbed somewhere else." So my staff members were able to get this guy calm, get him under control, and not respond to his threat display. He was smacking his chest, took his shirt off, was threatening to fight. My men were able to talk him down, walk him out to the perimeter of the facility, and get him into a police car, transport him to a mental hospital without injuring him, without fighting him. No beatdown, no taser, no nothing. And then his family called, and they were very happy. The mother and father were very happy that their 30-year-old son was not killed. We could have legally, of course, used fatal force because this individual was swinging a large blade at random people. Right. But we were able to calmly approach and solve the issue by communication, by inspiring him to put the blade down and inspiring him to not be violent and not responding to his attempt to incite violence. We inspired him to be peaceful. We were resilient, emotionally resilient. So even though he said he wanted to fight, he got into a fighting posture, we did not have to fight him because we knew we could subjugate him if necessary without injury. And he did everything he could right up to the line where we would have to take him into custody. We literally never had to actually touch him, except to walk with him and walk him off the property and get him into a police car. And the police took him into custody without issue and then took him to the hospital. So
beautiful.
These are the kind of things we've done for 25 years.
Right.
Back in the 90s, we used to fight almost every day. And the reason we used to fight a lot is because we're dealing with gangs. And more importantly, I thought the only way to match violence was with violence. I believed that constantly training for violence was the way to manage violence. As a result, we would look at violence as part of how we manage human threat versus a failure to properly manage threat. So now we look at violence as a failure. And at that time in the 90s, when we first started, I looked at violence as just part of what we do. It's a naturally occurring part of protection. And it's just not true. The truth is we remove the idea of violence from the table and we can actually create the peace we all want and need. And from that peace, we can create prosperity for every community, every corporation, and every country.
Yep, that's right. Well, this is a whole new paradigm. I hope some of the viewers, you guys are starting to understand why I love Threat Management Center and why they're doing such important work. They are helping inspire and empower us to evolve. We don't need to use violence to solve, as you mentioned, 9 out of 10 times. there are nonviolent, peaceful ways to help people that might need help. So if you have questions for Dale, I want to share something really cool. He's actually given a workshop in Acapulco in February at our event. So I want you to share a little bit, if you would, Dale, just about some of the things you're going to be teaching, because they don't teach us in school. 12 years of compulsory schooling, 5 years in college, whatever it is. One of the most important things, how to protect yourself, how to protect your lady or your children. This is basic, but you've been helping the community. I think you have like the women's program, the children's program, and helping empower the community so that if they need help, they don't necessarily have to call the cops. They can do it themselves or have some type of understanding the psychology, the tactics. And so you're holding a workshop, and so I'd recommend everybody participate if you're interested in this stuff. So could you share a little bit about what the attendees will learn in your workshop in February at Anarchapulco?
Yes, what you're going to learn in our workshop is literally how to keep yourself alive and safe. We teach you how to become your own bodyguard, how to understand psychology so you can read body language, so you can see the intentions of people prior to people showing you their actual predation on purpose. You can actually read it ahead of time. By creating those conditions of understanding, you can create the positive outcome you're looking for by not being in an adversarial condition or position. But the only way that can happen is if you can read the body language. We call it reading a person, recognizing evasive, aggressive, deceptive behavior. So that's a huge part of what we teach. Psychology, the strategies behind reading body language, and then projecting. Where should we stand? What should we say? What should we do if we see that there is a condition that is volatile or potentially volatile? What is our next step? What do we do if we don't want to kill people or get killed? How do we approach this person? How do we get away from them? How do we know the difference? Where should we stand? Where do our hands go? What do we say to them? All those things are vital and has nothing to do with actual fighting yet. So deterrence is first, detection is second, and defense is last. Deterrence, detection, defense. And that's what we teach in that order. You're going to learn psychology so you can deter things from happening, detection so you can understand body language, how to read it, and what course of action to take best next based on what you're detecting. And what I mean by that is this: if you don't understand civil and criminal law, defending yourself not only means you go to prison, but you lose all of your money. So what we do is make sure that you understand legally, civilly, and criminally what you're looking at and how to legally explain this and how to create the best possible outcome you can in a situation, including managing the issue in a monetary way. So for example, you may decide that instead of arguing with someone over $20, $50, or $100, that you will give them $100 because you know that your attorney fees are going to be more than $100. You know that going to jail and being proven right is going to be more than $100. You know that even if and even when you're legally considered correct in the use of violence, it's going to cost you way more than $100, $500, $1,000. And you could solve this issue by giving this idiot that's aggressive $1,000 or $500 or even $100. I've solved problems with $20. In fact, just last month, I stopped a mentally ill person from escalating using $3. $3 solved the problem. So you don't have to be violent just because someone wants to be violent is the point. And we're going to show you how to, as a system, how to create the outcome you're looking for. With disgruntled employees, we go to corporations. I get calls over the past 25 years many times. They have a problem. The police are a response-based organization. They're there to enforce laws that have been broken, okay? It's protect and serve law. They're not your bodyguard. They're not your protector. Their job is to maintain law and order, and sometimes police can't actually protect you, and they do protect people. And so one of the reasons you have to understand that the police mechanism is not a protection agency. They are a law enforcement agency, and that's what you hire them for. You want them to enforce laws. You can't expect a corporation to enforce laws. That's counterproductive. Think about that for a second. How can Penn State police arrest the person that's causing them to win all the football games and supporting their police pension and their corporation for all their students? So when you arrest these men at Penn State that turn out to be pedophiles, when you arrest Joe Paterno or get him fired for his involvement in complicity with the pedophiles at Penn State, you do know that the police department's not going to have money. The police department's not going to be able to hire people. They're going to lose pensions. They're going to lose cars. You're asking a corporate entity, which is what the Penn State Police Department is. It's a corporation paid for by the school. It's not paid by the state.
Yeah.
So you're asking them to do something that's going to harm their family, business-wise. You're asking someone to be more moral than they are motivated by money. That's fine in a church, maybe, not in my experience, but maybe you'll find a church that cares more about morals than money. But here's what I can tell you for sure. Most workers care, and most business owners care more about money than morals. Their objective is to make money. And if you're going to arrest people at your college that are going to destroy your economic condition, that is counterintuitive for someone who wanted to make money. I would have no problem turning them in because I don't care about money. I care about people. And so that's where I get very offended when people call me a private police agency or someone that's private military, because I have to get rid of the people that are mercenaries that try to join my organization. They have to care about people in order to be an asset to my organization. Otherwise, they're literally a liability to me, my clients, and the community at large if they care more about money than they care about morals and doing the right thing for people. So you have to put life before law, and you have to put protection before prosecution. And you have to believe that people's lives are more important than money.
Yeah.
The mission before money. The mission is to make the world a safer place through nonviolence. So in our organization, if you do something that's inappropriate, you're no longer part of the organization. You are a person that's now the enemy of what we provide, which is the pathway to a positive outcome. That means, let's say someone on our staff wanted to do something inappropriate to someone. They wanted to beat someone up or use force and violence that was unnecessary, and use it as a way of validating themselves and finding themselves relevant, form rites of passage to use violence because someone is being threatening and they can legally justify it. That person is terminated from our organization. Even though they could legally use violence, they chose to do that instead of using their training that purposefully circumvents that path and creates a non-adversarial, non-violence path by simply not having pride and ego associated with yourself and having more pride in your purpose than in your prosperity and your profit and your personal view of yourself and whatever it is you think you're supposed to be doing. So imagine asking corporations to do something that's not in their best interest. That's not ever going to happen because they have to do what's best for their money. So you need people that are motivated by the love of people if you want them to protect people. If you want people to love pets, you have to find, if you want people to protect pets, you have to find people that love the pet. You can't say to a person who loves cats but doesn't like dogs, here, I'm going to put you in charge of dog protection. I mean, they might accept the job because they're paying, but they're not going to be good at it because they don't like dogs. So whatever people that you choose for a certain type of position, especially in protection, they actually have to like what they're protecting. Otherwise, they truly can't. So people love what they protect and protect what they love. And you can't ask them or expect them to protect what they do not love. That's just the way humans are wired. So that being said, what we do as an organization is make sure that people have these understandings, and your training is going to give you some insights in how to best protect yourself, your family, your community, your corporation, and how to create the best possible outcome so you can have the least amount of adversarial interactions, the least amount of disruption to your life, and the least amount of violence. Because from protection, we can always create prosperity naturally. Prosperity is a natural byproduct of protection that is prevention-oriented. Protection that is violence-oriented destroys every possible avenue towards a profitable outcome. There's no way to profit through violence unless you are a state or a government. There's literally no way. And so imagine someone trying to think from the private sector how to use force and violence when they don't qualify for immunity. It literally can't work. So you have to have a completely different paradigm shift, and that's what this is. We show you how to protect yourself, your family, your community, and your corporation using skills that are based on psychology, law, and skill to deter, detect, and defend yourself and others from violence non-violently.
Beautiful. Yeah, no, I love pro-human philosophy. Your life is sacred. Human life is more important than money. I mean, how much, would you put your price for your child, for your own self, right? This is serious stuff. So if you want to learn from Dale, come to his workshop. You want to hear him speak, come to Anarchapulco, right around the corner. There is a health retreat on the front side. So the 10th, 11th, and 12th, and the main event is the 13th to the 16th. And there's some workshops afterwards as well. So Hey, if you want to help humanity evolve beyond coercive organizations, come listen to Dale, come take his workshop. There's going to be a lot of other people there. We're doing an investment summit also on the 11th and the 12th. So really cool things happening the whole week. A lot of visionaries like Dale from Threat Management are going to be there talking about schooling, education, health, crypto, finance. We didn't talk about the Federal Reserve. And you mentioned the private corporations. They have interests. So we're trying to inspire you guys watching and listening to take your own interest. Whatever you're pursuing in life, your aspirations, your goals, safety and protection has got to be one of the most important things. And so Anarchapulco is the place to be, to meet other like-minded people, to learn new skills, gain new knowledge, become confident in what you're doing with your protection of your family, of your community, and where we're going as a society. So Dale, thanks for joining us today. Look forward to see you in Mexico very soon here. And for some of the people who are thinking about it, come to Anarchapulco. It's going to be awesome. This is the 6th year we're doing it. Over 1,000 people will be there from around the world talking about peaceful solutions for all those things we mentioned. And we're going to keep spreading the peace and the love and the anarchy worldwide. See you all very soon. Bye-bye.